So the first poem we are going to actually cover today is a poem by John Gay. It's called The Turkey and the Ant. It's the first poem in the poems book for very good reasons. And it used to be the first study that we used to do at the academy. It was the first lecture of the course. Many of you will be aware there's a 3-year residential course at the Vedanta Academy in India. And the course used to start with this poem, The Turkey and the Ant, and for very good reasons, which you're going to soon be able to see. So when we're examining these poems, it's important that you obviously try and follow along. Not all of you will have the poem. If you want, it's something you can easily find on Google, but I'll bring it up on the screen so you can all follow. We'll read through the poem and try and first understand it, and then get into each stanza, each paragraph, and further scrutinize the poem and try and pull out the message. If anyone has any clarifications along the way, you're more than welcome to raise your hand, and there is a function in the bottom right that allows you to do this. And you can ask questions as we go along, or I have reserved some time at the end for questioning. So we'll get into the literature. The poem is The Turkey and the Ant. I'll just share my screen with you so you can follow along. In other men we faults can spy, and blame the mote that dims their eye. Each little speck and blemish find, to our own stronger errors blind. A turkey tired of common food, forsook the barn and sought the wood. Behind her ran her infant train, collecting here and there a grain. Draw near, my birds, the mother cried. This hill delicious fares supplies. Behold the busy Negro race, see millions blacken all the place. Fear not, like me, with freedom eat, an ant is most delightful meat. How blessed, how envied were our life, could we but scape the poulterer's knife. But man cursed man on turkey's prey, and Christmas shortens all our days. Sometimes with oysters we combine, sometimes assist the savoury chine. From the low peasant to the lord, the turkey smokes on every board. Sure men for gluttony are cursed, of the 7 deadly sins the worst. An ant who climbed beyond her reach, thus answered from the neighbouring beech. Ere you remark another's sin, bid thy own conscience look within. Control thy more voracious bill, nor for a breakfast nations kill. John Gay. So we see the poem, it starts with a synopsis, as it were. He gives you he basically gives you a briefing of the poem, what the poem is about. So the opening paragraph is important. In other men we faults can spy, and blame the mote that dims their eye. Each little speck and blemish find, to our own stronger errors blind. This gives you one of the meanings which the poem is about. So before we go on, is anybody got any ideas or further inputs as to what this poem is trying to convey? What is he trying to say in this poem? What is the lesson that he is trying to teach us? See, Vedanta is not just, and this is one of the reasons we do these poems, because Vedanta is not just limited to the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Prakriyas, all of that. It's not limited to Indian thought or Indian spiritual texts, but it is found everywhere. That's why we unearthed, these are all Western philosophers. So Vedanta is the eternal truths of life. So you will find these eternal truths everywhere, in poets, in authors. You can see it in nature, in fact. Vedanta is a living wisdom. So this is one of the reasons we take up these poems, just to show you that what these great men of the past, these great thinkers, see, they had unearthed these thoughts themselves. They had unearthed the truth themselves and were conveying it, trying to teach people about these great truths of life. So this is why we do poetry as well. Okay, just in answer to the questions that I asked. The question was, okay, we've got a synopsis. In the beginning, he says we tend to look at others' faults and do not find our own faults. So Jasmine says, don't blame others, look at yourself and reflect. Correct. So that is in line with what has been mentioned in the first paragraph. We see the faults in others clearly, but we don't see our own faults. Correct. This is both of these are correct. Anything else you pick up from the poem? Any other messages? We are guilty of what we blame others for. Correct. So this lies within the scope of seeing others' faults before our own, and then going on to blame others. Greed, yes, greed. Greed is definitely in there. It mentions gluttony. So, yeah, all of these are correct. We are not satisfied and constantly looking outside or for something better. This is exactly it, Brenda. What is this? What is this not satisfied, constantly looking outside? What do we call that as? See, Brenda said we are not satisfied and constantly looking outside. Craving, yes, we can call it as craving, or what we refer to simply as desire. So, excellent. He is highlighting the very nature of desire, desire within us. See, what is the need for looking outside if we are completely satisfied? No need. But we are not satisfied. We are incomplete. Or, in fact, we experience this feeling of incompleteness. When we experience a feeling of incompleteness, we try and fulfill that feeling by going out into the world, contacting the objects and beings of our desire, for fulfillment, should I say. So this is highlighted in the poem, which we are going to examine. This is one of the very nature of desire, constantly drawing us out. So this is the first message we're going to examine, is the nature of desire. Then we'll go on to examine the second lesson, which he's talking about the difference between extrovert and introvert, the difference between these two, which the poem is highlighting. So the nature of desire. So when he starts the poem, or in the second paragraph, what he says is, he says, a turkey tired of common food forsook the barn and sought the wood. Behind her ran her infant train, collecting here and there a grain. So the first thing that we appreciate in the poem is that the turkeys were living in a barn. In other words, the turkeys had shelter, they had food. You see what happens in the barn, these grain trucks, they come in and they offload the grain, repack the grain, ship it off, whatever it is, or whatever else. It could be anything else that they're farming. Now, just the spillover in the barn is more than enough to satisfy any turkey. There's more than enough food there. And that too, also living in a barn. So there's shelter. How does this relate to us? So this is the basic necessities, food and shelter. If you have food and shelter, actually you're okay. You don't need much more than that. Somehow we've managed to complicate things to such a degree that we need all these other things. These are the desires within us, pushing us outwards. So you're at home at the moment. You're allowed to shop for food. That's why essential services, food and shelter. You got your home. Even the homeless people, they've been shipped off. They got some shelter now and food. So these essential requirements for a human being are met in this turkey and the ant. Turkey has met these requirements. It's got enough food and it's also got shelter. But the turkey is not satisfied with that. The turkey wants something more. So it decides, let us go out and seek something else, something that which we don't have. This is the first aspect of desire. Desire, the very nature of desire is that it is insatiable. Desires are insatiable. See, the bird has got what it needs, yet it wants something else. So it pitches something else. This is exactly what we're doing all the time. We are pitching up a desire. What happens? We put in all our effort, we exert our resources to fulfill that desire. Because if we don't fulfill that desire, we remain agitated. We're in a state of agitation or stress. Stress is nothing but mental agitations produced by unfulfilled desires. So in other words, we have to go out. We have to contact these desires to reduce that agitation. Now, what happens when we indiscriminately contact desires? Now, indiscriminate contact of desires means that the mind is simply rushing out to fulfill the desires. There is no participation of any discretion in the pursuit of the desires. The mind simply pitches a desire and then drives the body to fulfill it. This is what we call as indiscriminate actions. Now, the problem with indiscriminately contacting desires, bear in mind, we're not saying give up all your desires, stop desiring, stop wanting, because you can't. It's impossible. What Vedanta does say is that you have these desires, right? Now, there's two ways of contacting a desire. One is indiscriminately, and this is when the mind just simply rushes after it. Those who have attended previous talks would acknowledge the example that we've given. The example with the diabetic. You offer a diabetic a sweet. He grabs it, he eats it. This is the mind functioning. It's simply going out to fulfill its desire. There's no participation of any intellectual inquiry or reason applied in that decision-making process. It simply goes. Now, the other aspect is you offer a diabetic a sweet and the intellect kicks in and says, hey, hang on, no, not a good idea, makes me feel bad, doctor said no. You may take the sweet and keep it for later or give it to someone else. So these are the two ways in which we contact desires. Now, when we indiscriminately contact the desire, in other words, when the mind is fully functioning, when the mind simply goes towards the desire, what happens there is more desires are created, more desires pop up. And so what happens? We fulfill a desire, and once that desire is fulfilled, are we satisfied? No. Must be another desire. And so the life goes on. Goes on to say, draw near my birds, the mother cries, this hill delicious fares supplies. Behold the busy Negro race, see millions black in all the place. Fear not like me, with freedom eat, the ant is most delightful meat. So the chickens were, the young chicks weren't sure, so the mother gave them sanction, said, no, you eat. Look, it's easy. You just pick. They were used to eating grain. It's not moving or anything. They just pick it. Now there's moving things. So she was encouraging them. Unfortunately, this is exactly how parents are teaching their children, teaching them to simply go out and fulfill the desires. So the mother chick says, no, no, just eat, just eat, just eat. And so they're eating away. Now the interesting part says, so they've got starting point, they've got the barn, they've got enough food, not satisfied. So what do? They go out for some other treat, some delicious meat. And what do they find? Ants. So they're picking these ants, right? Now you would think, okay, then now they've got the variety too. See, that's what they wanted, the variety. Are they happy? No. And how do we know that's exactly what she says next? How blessed, how envied were our life, could we but scape the poulterer's knife. But man cursed man on turkey's praise, and Christmas shortens all our days. This is exactly the next thing. Now that, okay, the turkey has variety of food. Now what's it looking for? What's the next thing it's looking for?
Security and safety.
Excellent. Perfect. That's it. Security. It wants to be protected from man. Man, cursed man. That man, if he didn't come along once a year and kill a turkey, how blessed would we be? We've got everything we need. So the next thing is security. Does it end there? No, it continues. And this is the very nature of the mind's desires. This is an aspect of the mind. Now, we're not here to say, listen, the mind thing is terrible, let's destroy the mind, get rid of it, and then we'll be happy in our existence. We're not advocating that. But what we have to appreciate is that we need to exercise a certain control over the mind. The mind has a particular nature. We're aware of that. One of the nature of the mind is this insatiable desire. The mind is compared to a fire. Now, any of you that have built a fire will know that no fire, any amount of wood you throw in the fire consumes. At no point does the fire stop consuming. It will go on consuming. And this is the similarity with the mind. The mind is never satisfied. The mind is always wanting more. The strange thing is, the mind doesn't have the capacity to understand that the nature of what it is doing. The mind cannot appreciate that when it achieves that next desire, it's going to be in the very same position that it was in before it got the desire. The mind can't project that. So the intellect, through education, can slowly coerce or educate the mind on this noble trait. Listen, mind, if the intellect and mind were to have a conversation, or you have a conversation with yourself. Listen, you are chasing this desire continuously, and you get the desire. And then what happens? You're in the same position that you were before you got the desire. Does this make any sense? So slowly, we have to educate the mind, or in fact, we have to educate ourselves in order to get the inner personality into a stronger position. This is called the science of self-development. Science of self-development is in fine-tuning the human personality, your inner constitution. This is what we are concerned with. So, extrovert is always going outwards, always going out to pursue the world, pursue the desires of the world, not realizing that any external pursuit can never satisfy that internal craving. You see, when we say pursuing relates to the inner temperament that is going after something. This is the desires in us. See, we may see someone perform an action. Say, that guy, why is he working so much? He's only after money, that guy. That might not be his internal pursuit. His internal pursuit may be something else. He's working for the benefit of society. He's not interested in the money at all. He's not interested in gaining more wealth. Why? You can examine, why do wealthy people continue to work to get more money? No, they're only interested in pursuing wealth. No, they may be interested in any number of things. Getting more wealth to not for themselves, but for others, for community service, whatever it is. So the pursuit is different from the action. This is another reason why we can never judge the actions of others. It is futile. We don't know what the intention behind another person's action is. Their actions could be virtuous or vicious. We don't know. We can't get inside their heads. And even if we ask them, what's to say they are telling the truth? So that is why it's important never to judge another person's action. So back to the turkey. So the turkey is not satisfied with what it's got its lot in life. This is every human being, never satisfied with its lot. So it goes out to fulfill its desire and believing that, and this is the trick, it believes that in the fulfillment of the desire, it will gain a sense of satisfaction. That's what the mind believes. It believes, if I get that, then I'll be happy. If I get that, then I'll be happy. If I get that, then I'll be happy. And constantly, this is your life. Never happy. You're never happy. So, because if you're always constantly in that thought, if I get that if I get that is what remains with you. The only way to change that is to be happy with what you have right now. That's not to say you stop developing, you stop growing. You can carry on amassing more wealth. You can carry on gaining more possessions. Nowhere in Vedanta does it say this is X amount of possessions you're allowed, X amount of wealth you're allowed, nothing after that. No, after that is indulgence. Nowhere does it say that. But there should not be this indiscriminate craving for wealth. Wealth just represents acquisition. And these are the two motivations in a human being's life: acquisition and enjoyment. This is what drives every human being to action: acquisition and enjoyment. So the nature of desires is to acquire what it doesn't have. There's a quote: never let your present happiness be determined by future acquisitions. Never let your present happiness be dependent, on future acquisitions, which is exactly what we're saying. You will need to be happy with what you have now. If you are not happy with what you have now, you will never be happy. So, back to our poem. So this is where the turkey is looking next, is for security. How blessed, how envied were our life, could we but scape the poulterer's knife. But man cursed man on turkey's praise, and Christmas shortens all our days. Sometimes with oysters we combine, sometimes assist the savory chime. From the low peasant to the lord, the turkey smokes on every board. Sure men for gluttony are cursed, of the 7 deadly sins the worst. So this brings us to our next point, this extrovert, introvert. And this is where most of you in the beginning picked up the message, which is we have a keen tendency to blame others. See, it's so easy to find faults in others. In fact, it's not difficult at all. Not difficult if you are extrovert in nature. What is difficult is identifying aspects of your own personality which are defective, which are wanting, which are off. That no one is prepared to do, because that requires a certain amount of effort. In fact, a great amount of effort. The entire Vedanta philosophy is taking that perspective on life, taking the mirror, as it were, and turning it inwards. How can I improve myself? In order to improve oneself, one needs to be acutely aware of the defects within one's own personality. Now, how can one be aware of the defects within one's personality? Well, first you have to understand what those limitations or defects or areas of weakness, let's say, are. How do you do that? Well, this is where knowledge comes in. Knowledge of life highlights a certain way of functioning which is conducive to peace and happiness. It presents a certain way of living or way of being which promotes individual peace and happiness. This is what knowledge does. This is what Vedanta does. Any knowledge, any philosophical text, any scriptural text, any higher value will direct you to living a higher life with purpose. So when we take the knowledge, when we are able to identify these higher aspects of existence, the first thing we need to be aware of is, okay, I'm either in possession of them or I'm not in possession of them. Now, this is easy to establish. You can see where your current level of peace and happiness is to gauge whether you have achieved that value in life. This comes from awareness. This comes from being able to look at yourself. This is the difference between extroversion and introversion. An extrovert is always someone who is blaming the world. He's always going outwards. Anything that happens, any problem that arises within his life, it's got nothing to do with him, but everything to do with that person. No. You come and meet my family. You come and meet my wife and tell me that the problem is with me, Craig. You haven't met her. Or you come to my office. No, you just come down there and see the conditions I have to work in. You're telling me that I have a problem? Extrovert is always blaming the circumstances, situations, people around and about them. They never gain the opportunity to look within. No, we're not blaming anyone here. This is simply because they lack knowledge. They're ignorant of the higher truths of life and living. So through education, we're able to begin turning that mirror, looking within. See, I can prove to you any problem that you face, any difficulty, any challenge you're meeting, got nothing to do with what's happening outside, but everything to do with what is happening inside. The ant eventually sees all this happening. So it sees this turkey blaming man, right? Blaming man, our lives would be ideal if it weren't for this man, sure man, gluttony, saying a gluttonous fella. It's very interesting because the turkey is calling man a glutton. The turkey calls man a glutton. Now examine it. Examine this statement. It's very interesting if you work it out mathematically. How many people can one turkey feed? And that too, remember, turkey, you can't go every week to the shop and go buy turkey. Or you go out to a restaurant and turkey is on the menu. Once a year it comes. Thanksgiving, Christmas, I think. Once a year turkey comes. And maximum you have turkey once a year, right? Now, how many people can one turkey feed? You have to forgive me, I'm vegetarian. 10, 12, 10 to 12 people. One turkey feeds 10 to 12 people once a year. Okay. Now, how many ants does a turkey consume in a meal? I tried to research this, I could not find out, but we can guess. Maybe 50 ants. Would everyone say that's fair? 50 ants in a meal? Pick. 50, 100? Okay, 100. Brenda's saying more like 100. Okay, so 100, that's one meal. Now times that by 3. So 300 in a day. Okay, now 300 times 365. So 300 a day, that has to eat every day, right? Now, so 300, I'm going to work this out for you. So, yeah, because I can't do this in my head right now. I should have asked Jess, she's a mathematician. 109,500. 109,500. Compared to 1/12. Men are gluttonous. This is the turkey saying this. Men are gluttonous. Deadly sin, this gluttony. Because 1/12 compared to, what's 1/12 compared to 109,500? The relationship is completely off. And this is exactly what is being said. This is exactly what it says in Matthew 7, I think verse 5. It says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while there is still a beam in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. It's the same principle. Where's a speck compared to a beam of wood? It's if you calculated it, you'll probably find it's exactly the same ratio. 1/12 to 109,500. You can do the calculation, but I'm pretty much sure you'll come out with the same answer. So this is exactly what is happening. The turkey is blaming man when itself has the same fault, however many times that 12 to 109,500 is. It's huge. It's a huge number. That times more. So this ant climbs up, right, and managed to escape the little chicks, managed to escape the main turkey, reached up onto a hill, and he says, an ant to climb beyond his reach, thus answered from a neighboring beach. And these lines are important. If you can get these lines off by heart, you should. Because this will remind you, you see, to remember everything that I've been going on about for the last 40 minutes is difficult. But if you remember just these 4 lines, it'll all come flashing back to you. So the ant says to the turkey, ere you remark another's sin, bid thine own conscience look within. Control thy more voracious bill, nor for a breakfast nations kill. Ere ye remark another's sin. Look at your own actions, man. Look what you're doing. In other words, he's advising the turkey to turn inwards, look inwards. Your faults are far greater than man's, mate. And this sums up the poem. So here was the turkey destroying nations of ants, and whereas man just destroying one turkey. So before you start pointing the finger to blame others, and we're all masters at this, especially now, as someone sent me an article I found very interesting. There's something in this lockdown called snitches. everybody is phoning in if they see someone else doing something bad. And it was, even I experienced this without actually, I was going to the shop on my bicycle. It's just down the road. My car's actually broken out. So I was on my bike, anyway I can get there, bicycle. My goodness, the horrified look of drivers looking at me while I was driving on my bicycle to the shop. Now, where'd they come from? Probably the same shop, actually. Now, this is exactly the point. People are so concerned with other people's business. Why is that fellow going out? Second time he's been out today. You see that? Second time. I saw his car go out this morning, and it's going out again. Twice. Now, how many times did you go out yesterday? Actually, 3 times. And this is exactly what is happening. I found it fascinating, this article. Actually, a bit of tongue-in-cheek, this author. But this is exactly highlights what's being said here. See, you're always willing to blame others or look out and point your finger at others. Now, it's one thing to be able to do that. Okay, you might not be able to pull back and stop that from immediately happening, but you can give it a flavor of introversion. You may notice a fault in someone else. The first thing you should do, and we'd covered this in a previous lecture, the first thing you need to do is, hey, hang on, do I have that same fault in me? And how much more magnified is it in me than what I'm seeing? This is the question you need to pose to yourself. So whenever you do see a fault, and we're not saying that everyone is faultless. In fact, this process of introversion allows you to, in fact, develop a greater sense of empathy and love for others. Because if you see a fault in others and you're immediately able to say, hey, do I possess that same fault? And if so, how much more magnified? And you may come to the conclusion, invariably, and it's not a direct cause and effect, not that you see the fault, that you've got the fault. It's not always like that. But you may notice that you have that fault within yourself too. Automatically, what does that establish? It establishes an empathy for the other person. Oh, you know what? I know how you feel, mate, because I've got the same thing I'm dealing with, the same issue, that same fault that you've got, I've got. Immediately, there's an ability to relate to the other. Now it's, why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that. That's not right. This is the current attitude. So just by developing that change in attitude, you're already being able to identify with others more. Identification with others is nothing but empathy, or what we call as love. Being able to identify with another. Their pain is your pain. Their joy is your joy. Their faults are your faults. I don't know if any of you have watched the Count of Monte Cristo. This Count of Monte Cristo is brilliant. It's actually a short, I think it's a short series. It was around for a long time. A long time ago, it came out. Anyway, it's one of the movies that we watch at the academy. And don't think we sit there watching movies every Friday. All the movies, the same as these poems, all have a value, all have a lesson to be learned. That's why we do them. So what happens is, in this Count of Monte Cristo, Count of Monte Cristo has this faithful servant. And this servant is continuously serving the Count. He's not necessarily, he's a very, very dedicated servant. He is willing to, in fact, he goes to the ends of the earth to serve the Count. Now, there was a situation, and the Count suspected someone else of poisoning this, of attempting to poison this woman. So what he said to the servant, listen, you go to the scene, and here is the antidote. And if you see that this a man gives this woman the poison, let him leave, and then you rush in and feed the antidote. You feed the antidote to the woman and thereby reviving her. He understood the plot. So he went there, and then he was partaking of some of the food, and then he thought to himself, my goodness, what happens if I ate the poison? And he consumed the antidote. Himself. Then he realized, oh my goodness, I've made a mistake. I've made a grave error here. That antidote was meant for her. So he rushes back to the count, and he says, listen, I'm so sorry. This is what I did. What is my punishment? He says to the count, what is my punishment? I've failed you. To which the count says these famous words. He says, I too am not infallible. I too am not infallible. In other words, I too am susceptible to faltering. I too have my faults. I too am have my weaknesses. I too make mistakes. So there's so many beautiful lessons in that series. If you're able to watch it and draw out the message. Similarly with these poems, and that's why we're going through them. There's so many lessons in these poems to pull out, and it gives it to us pretty directly. So that is the poem. And just another aspect before I close, it's not, and what you should appreciate, it's not that if we see someone behaving in the wrong way, or if we see another person committing a grievous error, or you see someone mugging someone else, oh no, am I a mugger too? And you don't do anything. It's not that we're not saying you should take this attitude of the world is the world, let it just be. If you feel that there is some action that needs to be taken for correction, then by all means do it. But that doesn't change the attitude in which you do it. And you'll find a lot in what we are teaching is all about a shift in one's attitude. Remember, initially I'd said it's not always translated into one's actions. You don't know why a person is performing the actions he's doing. You don't know the intentions behind the actions. So it's important to not judge someone on the actions, but if you feel that something needs to be corrected, then by all means correct it. Okay, so that is the discussion. If anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to ask, or any other comments. I know there's a lot of lines in the poem, perhaps there's something you don't understand. So if anybody has any questions or comments, we'll just give a few minutes. We did a few minutes at the end of the session for questions.
Craig?
Yes, Jess.
I just want to ask whether it's related to this, similar sort of thing. Often people quite like it when other people fail. Not like it, but there's people often get a sense of joy. It makes them feel better to see others fail. There wouldn't be tabloid magazines if that wasn't the case. People can't wait to read of someone else. Is that a similar sort of thing? What is that? Because that's not necessarily pointing out a fault. It's people taking enjoyment in someone else's failure.
So this is nothing but the ego at play. So the ego is a master at trying to make sure that itself, in fact, one of the manifestations of the ego is I am supreme. So any way in which it can establish that sense of superiority, it will go for. And this is easily done by seeing others' falls. Oh, they obviously couldn't get it right, but I can get it right. Oh, that is obviously their own fault, you know. That's their problem. It gives you a feeling of superiority. And this is something that the ego loves to buy into. Wants to feel that sense of superiority. I am supreme. I am better than you. This is the ego. So yes, there is a relationship between the ego and desires. Out of the ego springs the desires. So when one has an ego, which is again that identification with, excuse me, identification with the material aspects, an exaggerated emphasis on those material aspects of our personality, the body, mind, intellect. When one has an exaggerated emphasis on these material aspects of the personality, one develops desires pertaining to the body. So physical desires. One also entertains emotional desires, desires pertaining to the mind, or intellectual desires pertaining to the intellect. So out of the ego arises the desires. And again, what the poem is saying is these desires are insatiable. This is the nature of the desires. This is what we're examining in the poem, is the nature of the mind and its desires. But yes, they all spring from ego, and ego attempts to assert itself at every point. I am better. I am supreme. Look at the faults of these people. So it's an expression of the ego. Okay?
Thank you.
I think we had Karina, I think you're up next.
Hi, good morning. Thanks. I just wanted to comment on two parts of the poem that, you know, we didn't really speak about. The one was that line where it says, "See millions blacken all the place." And I suppose when it comes to these desires, sometimes it seems like it doesn't really harm anyone. There's so many, like it doesn't harm anyone if I have 5 extra biscuits, or if I buy a second or a third or a 12th watch, or if I have so many pairs of shoes. And yeah, I just kind of like that just tied into that sentence for me.
Okay, so the line says, this hill delicious fares supplies, behold the busy Negro race, see millions blacken all the place. So millions blacken all the place is he's just showing the extent of the potential damage. So
Okay.
the young chicks and the turkey, and there are millions of them. So that's the potential damage. So
okay.
that's why he highlights this millions. That's how many have the potential to be eaten. Millions, he says. We only established it at 100 a meal. Now I don't know how many chicks there were. So it's just emphasizing the greatness of its gluttony, in fact, which comes up a bit later. So in terms of your second clarification, when we examine this aspect of desires not harming others, fair enough, that is one thing. Not every desire that we entertain is going to be detrimental to others. How is me eating biscuits going to be more biscuits being detrimental to others? In fact, it's probably supporting someone's industry. It's actually helping others. You could look at it that way. But this is where the examination of one's own personality kicks in. I have a desire. This is the whole exercise. This is the exercise of Vedanta. We are interested in examining the effects on one's own personality. How are desires impacting on my sense of well-being? How did they affect me? How did they prevent me from achieving a sense of lasting peace and happiness? See, this is what we have to start appreciating. If we appreciate that we're all aiming to achieve some relative sense of peace and happiness in our life, everyone is looking for that, right? So you're aiming to achieve that sense of peace and happiness in our life. So it will be of interest to us to examine those areas that prevent us from achieving that. See, if I ask any of you, what is it that you want from life? What is it you're trying to achieve? And you may all say different things. This is because we all have different desires. Some may say, you know, I just want a nice, quiet place to stay and some gainful employment. Others might say, actually, I just want to get back to work. That's all. If I can get back to work, I'll be the happiest person ever. And others might say, no, I don't mind the work of that, but kids should get back to school. Kids get back to school. That is the happiest moment of my life. So everyone will manifest differently. Now, why does one person want this, one person want that? See, at the end of the day, everybody is actually looking for the same thing. What is that fulfillment of that desire going to give you? It's going to give you a sense of peace, happiness. In fact, peace and happiness is the same thing. And how do we define peace and happiness? Is the cessation of agitation. What is that agitation? The unfulfilled desires. So, yes, the desires we entertain ourselves might not be damaging to anybody else, but we have to assess how damaging those desires are to oneself. Now, the damaging effect of the desire is the indiscriminate contact, because through indiscriminate contact, not only are we feeding the desires, but another aspect of desires is it multiplies like bacteria. So we think by contacting a desire, by fulfilling a desire, khatam, finished, over. That's done. What we've actually done is we've planted more desires, because now with the biscuits you need some tea, and now with the tea you need some milk, and with the milk you need some sugar, and then you need a kettle, and so it's just exponentially creating further desires. Now, what that does in the inner personality is the more desires you entertain, the more chance there is of desires being unfulfilled. See, you contact one desire, 10 more spring up. Out of that, 10 more. That's why we say exponentially increasing desires upon indiscriminate contact. Indiscriminate contact means the mind's just traveling towards the desire. Discriminate contact is when the intellect participates, either disallows or sanctions. That's okay. There's not a great chance if the intellect participates in the decision-making part of the equation that the desires can exponentially arise. It's when the desires are contacted indiscriminately that the potential for an exponential explosion of more desires occurs. More desires means more chance of unfulfilled desires. Unfulfilled desires are what creates the agitation in us. Agitation is that which prevents us from attaining peace and happiness in our lives. So you're right. Not all desires are detrimental to others. But what we have to establish is how detrimental that desire is to ourselves. That's the
yeah. Great, thanks. There was another sentence which, I mean, we don't have to talk about it. I'm just going to tell you what it is, and then if there isn't any other questions, we can maybe talk about it.
Okay.
And that's the significance of the, I think the eighth last line, where it says, from the low peasant to the Lord. The turkey smokes on every board. Maybe you can talk about that if somebody else doesn't have another question.
So I don't see anyone else's hand up. Wait, I think there was someone who wrote in a question. No. Okay, so we can approach it. So he's talking about how the turkey is served. Not much to look into. Sometimes with oysters we combine, sometimes it's just the savory charm. From the low peasant to the Lord, the turkey smokes on every board. So what we could interpret from this is that none is free from this desire. Nobody is free. Whether you're a low peasant could also mean someone with relatively few desires or doesn't possess many desires, to someone who has many desires. That's one way of interpreting. I'm not saying it's the only way of interpreting. Or you could say someone who is very poor or someone who is very wealthy. This desire does not escape anybody. Desires are with you. Doesn't matter from what culture, what race, what religion, what age group, what wealth bracket, socioeconomic bracket. It doesn't matter. The desires will never escape you. In other words, the nature of the mind is the same for everybody. The mind has a particular nature. This is what we have to appreciate. The mind has a particular nature. The nature of the mind we are examining here is this tendency for extrovertedness, this tendency to contact and fulfill desires, constantly going outwards to the world to gain a sense of inner peace and fulfillment. It is an erroneous belief. It is impossible. Arthur Schopenhauer says, a famous German philosopher, it is difficult to find happiness within oneself, difficult, but it is impossible to find anybody else, to find it anywhere else. It is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. The extrovert is going everywhere else, looking outwards to find inner peace. He says impossible. You cannot find inner peace by going out. The only way you can find inner peace is by going within. What is going within? Going within is examining the inner personality. How can I reconstitute, improve the inner personality? That is Vedanta.
Thanks. For
Okay, great. So that's our hour today. We will have another session next week, probably examining the poem "The Pond" by Jane Taylor. And yeah, you are more than welcome to join us at one of the other offerings during the week. There's obviously the weekly classes that are happening. Otherwise, we'll see you next Saturday. Everyone enjoy the weekend, stay safe, and best wishes. Cheers.